Hello everyone, how are you? I'm Hariuha and today I'm going to talk about a few common misconceptions concerning the runes. I thought this would be perhaps an interesting and useful video because indeed there are an awful lot of wrong ideas and misconceptions concerning the runes, the great majority fomented by New Age movements, neo-pagan religious organizations focused on politics, and of course occult groups of children playing at being wizards. I feel it's also important to reinforce that in the past 3 years and a half or so, well, since I have become a YouTuber, I've been making my own rune series, picking up each rune from the elder Futhark and speaking about their meaning. Again, I must say that those videos are the very few non-academic videos on this channel. Certainly, I incorporate mythology and historical facts in those videos to reinforce and give some meaning to my claims, to explain to you why I have constructed such meanings for each rune. But those rune series are a more esoteric approach to the subject, bringing the runes closer to us in an attempt to apply them to our daily needs and our modern society. Those rune series are reaching an end by now, and the meaning behind them that I've constructed for you will be precisely so you can apply that information to divination methods, which I shall show you in the future. So, I get a lot of questions, like a lot, seriously, every day I get a lot of questions concerning the runes, their meanings, their historical use, precisely because of my own rune series, and this has led to a couple of misunderstandings. I always separate the academic work from the videos I do with a more esoteric approach, and I'm always careful to let you know that. So this video today will serve also as a video requested by many of my patrons, and answering not only their questions, obviously, concerning the runes, but also the questions posed on the comments of this channel by this community, as well as the messages I get concerning the runes on my other various social media networks. So I've picked the most asked questions concerning the runes, and I'll try to answer them. Again, I must remind you and reinforce, my rune series are the very few non-academic videos I have in this channel. And in those rune series, I give you meanings for each rune in order to apply to divination methods as well. So perhaps we should start right away with this perception that the runes are magical symbols and used for divination. So please, let's get started. So, the runes and runic symbols have certainly gained a lot of importance in the past century. One of the persons responsible for this was J.R.R. Tolkien. He has presented to us the use of runes by the peoples of Middle-earth in his literary works since the late 30s of the past century. And this has influenced a lot of generations, including my own, and opened up a new interest in the study of the runes. It's precisely during the 30s of the 20th century that there is this huge boom concerning mysticism and the pagan past and the occult as well, which continue on practically until our days, which is precisely the new age for various religious constructions and reconstructions and a big focus on the occult, mysticism and the pagan past. So there has been a great focus on runes in various areas, and often filled with fantasies and misunderstandings. Please, don't take this video as if I am deliberately attacking some organization or group or anything, or as if I were taking away any credit to mysticism and esotericism. Good gods, as you know, I am one of those making esoteric works concerning the runes since 2009, when I started to write on blogs, and you wouldn't even imagine the amount of my works that ended up on some other people's books and websites as well. And I also don't go always by the name of Hariuha, but that doesn't matter right now. Now, every information is welcomed as long as we are able to discern the truth from the falsehood, obviously. I actually find it extremely interesting the amount of New Age stuff that is invented concerning a variety of subjects. On the point of view, of course, of the study of New Age religions and why such inventions pop up in our modern times. It's interesting, entertaining, and part of our history, and also curious to understand the psychological behavior behind all these New Age inventions, creativity, and development in a time of religious downfall and the changing of mentalities. So let's start with the idea that the runes are magical symbols. I think this is, without a doubt, the most common idea and taken as the unquestionable truth by many people. And indeed, this is a question that I receive quite a lot, almost every day, that every rune is a magical symbol or it has a magical meaning behind it, and therefore it was used for magic, particularly divination. And on this line of thought, this led to the belief that every runic inscription there is magical in nature, and the intention behind the creation of such inscriptions was precisely for magical purposes. This happened basically due to the popularization of fantasy works, such as The Lord of the Rings, awesome, and other works of fantasy, of course, that came after and were influenced by the great mind of J.R.R. Tolkien. So there was a great interest in such works, and it progressively led to the merging of runic historical inscriptions with themes expressed in the poetic and prose Eddas, as well as, of course, linking the runes to mythological events and merging it all together with other cultures and New Age occult meanings in an attempt to find parallels. And of course, since there was this perception that the runes were magical symbols, the runes have been transported to a variety of magical arts, including divination methods, mostly trying to apply the basic notions of tarot and other fortune-telling methods to the runes. And rune yoga was even created, which, as I've said on the video about common misconceptions in Old Norse religion, rune yoga is the work of 20th century runic magicians of Germany who developed a system they called Ständehalter, or rune yoga. And it is much more inclined actually to Indian religious principles and discipline rather than actual Old Norse religious conceptions. And the runes became part of occult groups as well, always trying to merge symbols, a variety of symbols, and find new universal meanings that were simply not there. Originally, they did not exist. So we often hear that the great majority of runic inscriptions were used for magical purposes. They contain magic in them, and the runes themselves were magical, and so it added an extra power to the inscriptions themselves. In reality, the vast majority of the content of the runic texts of the Viking Age, Viking era, more or less around 3,000 inscriptions, has no direct relation to religion, myth, or magic, addressing purely commemorative, literally funerary subjects, and also concerning praise to something or to someone. Not surprisingly, actually few of the practices associated with runic writing seem to be inherently focused on magical purposes. You see, when we really find a lot of runic inscriptions, it's precisely during the Viking period. This doesn't mean they did not exist before, because they did, and were used during the Iron Age. But the runes are primarily a writing system, so it was used to express something. Even though the runes are not something exclusively or originally Germanic in nature, as they existed before since prehistoric times, and seem to have started as stylized representations of what humans came in contact with during their daily lives. So they had already been used as symbols, graphic symbols, to express a form of communication before they became a writing system. But Iron Age Germanic peoples used the runes as a form of writing. So they wrote everything with runes. It's what they had. So that doesn't mean they were using the runes specifically for magic, because it's a writing system. It's to express something and not purposely using the runes specifically for magic. It's the same thing as us nowadays, at least in the great part of the Western society, using the evolution of the Latin alphabet. And in 1,000 years from now, humans will be using an entirely different writing system, and they will look at the past and see the letters of the alphabet we use today and say, well, these guys were using these specific symbols for magical purposes. Of course, why else? Because our writing system now is so different than these symbols of the past. Of course, as I have expressed in the video about talismans and runic inscriptions, there are artifacts that were purposely created for magical purposes. The great majority of them is in relation to apotropaic magic. But that's the thing. It's not the runes themselves that create magic in such artifacts. It's the intention expressed in there. And the runes were used to write the intention. This also goes to runic curses, which I have also expressed on another video concerning the Nidstang and curses, precisely. It's not about the runes themselves with the intention of causing a supernatural effect, but it is the intention expressed, and the runes are used to permanently express that intention. This doesn't mean, as I have said, that there aren't specifically runes in which the purpose is to call upon the power of the rune. We have one beautiful example of the continental Germanic Iron Age on a bracteate with the inscription Laþu, Laukar, Gakar, Lule, which specifically means evocation, Laukas or locus, and cuckoo magic. So it's in relation to bird magic and evocation of the rune locus, the rune of water and ocean. This is an Iron Age example of evoking the power of a specific rune to add to the magical intention. And Laþu, Laukar, Gakar, Lule is part of the lyrics of one of Eilung's songs, as you know. And if you wanted to check my own interpretation of the phrase Hariuha, Laþu, Laukar, Gakar, Lule, Ole, Lule, Laukar, found in one of their songs, check this video I've done concerning that purely nerd stuff. However, when actually addressing religious themes, many runic inscriptions from the Viking Age are Christian. Only very, very few are related to magic and paganism, usually spells and invocations or evocations to Thor, but also healing spells and a few curses. And these curses serve a lot more as warnings in the Viking Age rather than directly cursing, as in do not do this or this will happen to you. Actual cursing, directly cursing or creating an intention to curse someone comes from the Christian period. And I've explained that on the video precisely about curses, which I've already recommended here on this right upper corner. Check this information icon if you can, or go down below into the description and check the links of the recommended videos. Now, concerning the use of runes for divination purposes, and I take the opportunity to also talk about the blank rune, which is often part of New Age rune sets coming in little pouches, and in there comes a blank rune in it. I have said before 100 times in several occasions, there is no real indication that the runes were actually used for divination purposes. Latin sources during the Germanic Iron Age speak about some continental Germanic tribes using staves with inscriptions or symbols for divination purposes, the casting of lots. And by the descriptions, they sound like runic symbols. We are not certain what the actual symbols were, but they could have been runic symbols carved on staves and cast as lots. So there are objects made of, these were objects made of perishable materials, so we do not find this in archaeology, obviously. However, before Germanic peoples used the runes, Western Iberian peoples were already using runic symbols at least 5,000 years before Germanic peoples. It's a very ancient form of communication, and this means the runes have been obviously evolving quite a lot through time. We don't know how many runes were used during the Germanic Iron Age. We keep using the 24 runes of the Elder Futhark, a specific sequence based solely on the Silverstone finding in Sweden, which has these 24 runes, and this usual row that was understood in the early 20th century as to be the alphabet used during the Iron Age of Germanic and Scandinavian peoples. But the truth is that there were more runes than just these 24 runes. But that sequence is the official sequence due to that finding, and it was established like that in academia. We don't know how many runes were in use actually, how many different symbols and meanings, because we find them, but we don't have the meanings. That's completely lost to us. We have a better idea concerning the runes when it comes to the Viking period in Scandinavia, where the runes changed precisely when language changes from Proto-Norse into Old Norse. And we get a shorter row of runes, the 16 runes, and their meanings in rune poems. But those are the so-called Younger Futhark, the Scandinavian runes, which are a specific set of symbols, a specific set of runes from a specific period, and culture and language. And we know their meaning because from that moment on we have runic poems speaking of each of these runes. Old Norse, Anglo-Saxon, Icelandic and also Swedish rune poems that give us the meaning of a couple of runes, and not the 24 we have so labeled Elder Futhark. And certainly we don't even have indications of the hundreds of thousands of runes since prehistory that eventually have been lost to us, because we do find a variety of prehistoric runic symbols, the oldest so far from Western Iberia. So there was a long process of evolution of these symbols, runic symbols, and picking up a few to equate with each specific language and used runic symbols as a writing system. We know during the Viking Age runes were sometimes used for magical purposes. Perhaps not divination, but we have evidences of mostly being used in apotropaic magic, or evoking a deity, mostly Thor. Adding a blank rune is simply a modern approach to the runes in terms of divination, adding to the runes what works in tarots and oracle decks. Methods of reading the runes or methods of removing the runes and placing them in certain positions are mostly taken from the use of the tarot, or methods that come close to the card system originating in various parts of Europe and produced as an oracle during the 700s, with no direct relation to the runes themselves. This is where the idea of the meaning of the runes comes from when they appear in an inverted position, which is one of the things I actually present in my rune series as well. But I never try to hide it or deny it. It is a tarot method of analyzing the symbolisms of the card by its position. As I was saying, there are no evidences whatsoever for a blank rune. It's hard enough to understand what runes were actually being used, and we know for sure many have been lost to us, and harder still to know if they were actually used for divination. So a blank rune isn't a plausible thing. Personally, I use the runes for divination. It works, at least for me, but that's something I've found, and it works because I have incorporated the runes into divination methods and even created divination methods of my own. But this is not something from the historical past. So what I do in there, and what others do in terms of using the runes for divination purposes, doesn't mean it's historically accurate. Not at all, actually. I use certain methods and for divination with the runes, and they work, but I do not use the blank rune if you want to know. But more on the blank rune further ahead in a moment. Now, I am sure you will find quite often this assumption in a couple of esoteric New Age books concerning the runes that the distribution and the widespread of the runic alphabets in antiquity was due to their supposedly supernatural character. In fact, the distribution of runes in European antiquity was related to its use as a graphic communication tool, adapting and evolving according to the different languages adopted by the Germanic peoples mostly. And that's just it. Continue to speak about divination, we have the important aspect of the runes having been used by oracles as an oracle method to perceive the will of the gods or of the supernatural reality and events to come. As I said, there is absolutely no historical or archaeological evidence that runes were actually used as a divination instrument or oracle, at least in the Viking period. New Age writers of esoteric works about the runes often, actually always, quote the famous little excerpt from Tacitus' work Germania from around the late 1st century of the Common Era. And as it is obvious, it is an historical time well before the Viking Age period. It is what I have already said before, symbols carved on staves created from branches of a specific tree, previously chosen for this purpose, staves used as lots, and as Tacitus described, they are thrown into a white cloth. The small staves are picked up 3 times, one by one, and from there the oracle predicts the outcome of an event, or the will of the gods. The oracle made an interpretation according to the symbols on the staves that were picked up. According to some experts, this description of Tacitus applies to runic oracle. But this is very problematic because it predates the historical existence of the Germanic writing system by at least 2 centuries, making it very doubtful that the said signs or symbols or characters in those staves used by the oracle were actually runic in nature. As I said, we find runic prehistoric symbols in Western Iberia, even before the Etruscans were using runes or runic symbols, which influenced old Italic peoples in the Iron Age, and eventually runes were introduced to the Germanic peoples. But we find no evidences or runes in Germanic context before or during the period described by Tacitus, the 1st century. Runes are introduced to Germanic peoples at least 2 centuries after Tacitus' description, as I have said. The contemporary use of runic divinatory systems gained popularity actually after the publication of Ralph Blum's book in 1987, the Book of Runes. Although he never actually claimed any historical veracity, no historical facts whatsoever about his methods. But since the publication of this book, a whole generation of people have been using divinatory methods without questioning about the historical authenticity of this system presented by Ralph Blum, especially among neo-pagan groups. Like I said, I too use divination methods with the runes, but I am aware that what I am doing probably wasn't done in the actual historical past. Not with the runes anyway, but I do it anyway because it bloody works. It is of my belief that religion is meant to evolve with the changing of mentalities of a society. A change of mentalities that aims to construct a better, brighter, and wiser future, of course. That has been the true essence of paganism since the very first prehistoric demonstrations of early humans trying to express a connection with or towards the supernatural. The religious mind has always been evolving, so why stop now? Of course, we need to be aware of the actual historical past, what is actually something that was done in the past, and what are the new conceptions of our modern days. Which is why I do find it absolutely fascinating and extremely useful the study of New Age religions, religious reconstructions, because it actually helps to differentiate what is new and what isn't. Now, the current oracle divination rune tradition is not based in any ancient or medieval historical past, but it's actually a Gothic revival linked to Romanticism from the late 700s to the Brothers Grimm and then to Wagner until the redesignations of the runes by the Nazis and by Tolkien, which gave entirely different meanings to the runes. Mind that I'm not saying that Tolkien was a Nazi, no connection there whatsoever. What I'm saying is that the meaning behind the runes that we have right now, nowadays, in a variety of esoteric books, the meaning without counting with what comes in historical rune poems, the great part of the meaning we have of the runes nowadays and designations of the runes comes from a long process of romanticized Gothic revival since the late 700s, passing by a variety of moments focused on that same romantic revival, especially of the 19th century, and in the 20th century, the Nazis and Tolkien, two distinct subjects, gave a whole new meaning to the runes based on the previous romantic movements. The Nazis for political purposes based on nationalist traditional ideas, and Tolkien for epic fantasy purposes. The late 30s of the past century, which was, as I said, a very special moment in terms of occultism and mysticism and the great boom in New Age mysticism and paganism. Several pagan and esoteric traditions were actually invented in the contemporary world or are products of specific romantic revivals of modern period, which does not invalidate the practices themselves. Mind that. Of course, from the point of view of religious freedom. From the historical point of view, however, that's a whole other story. But as I've said, with this video, it's not my place or even the function of this video to judge or discriminate, but simply to assist in the comprehension of the social understanding of the present and the past. Now, we spoke before about the blank rune, and that is a blunt evidence of the modern influence upon the runes and this modern idea of the runes being used as an oracle. The blank rune is often perceived to be the 25th rune of the Elder Futhark, and since every other rune has a name in the Elder Futhark, which are not the original or historical names, because we don't know them, but an academic conclusion based on several linguistic evidences and coming to a universal conclusion of the names of the runes of the so-called Elder Futhark, and also, of course, based on medieval runic poems. And so to the blank rune it was also given a name. It needed one, often called Weird, or the rune of Odin, precisely introduced by Ralph Blum. Blum's variation in the type of rune system used was also never explained. He kept some alphabets and characters and eliminated others for no apparent reason. Please take in mind that my position here is not to demonstrate that people cannot use or believe in divinatory systems. You are free to believe in whatever you want. It's not my place to tell anyone what they should or should not do or believe in. I'm not the Christian God. I'm not judgmental. Each individual should have the freedom to believe in whatever calls to them. My position here is simply to show you the actual historical evidences concerning the runes. It's important to understand that we are not using an old divination system of the Germanic Scandinavian peoples. Some little pouches we buy nowadays on eBay with a set of runes labeled the Elder Futhark do come with a blank rune sometimes, and even a piece of white cloth. But as we have seen so far, this isn't historically accurate. This type of method on the part of occultists is in establishing a supposed antiquity for their practices is very recurrent in order to achieve greater credibility and acceptance in their community, or to have acceptance in a larger audience. You know who ruins occultism? Occultists. This is something very recurrent in occultism, having a bunch of new age ideas, trying to link them all together and try to link things that were never originally linked together, making a lot of assumptions, and then establishing a made-up historical antiquity to the subjects in order to pass on some credibility. So do be careful with this. And of course, speaking of the occult, this leads me to speak about the black sun symbol. Once again, please. Now, the black sun symbol, not the blank sun symbol. I've already done a video concerning this where I specifically say a dozen times on that video that my aim is only to focus on the historical truth, and not the several occult and esoteric assumptions about this symbol, the black sun symbol. Even so, the great majority of the comments on that video are people saying that the black sun symbol is this and that, as if all the new age assumptions about this symbol were the historical truth. There is often the idea that the black sun symbol was a powerful religious symbol either from continental Germanic Iron Age people or from Old Norse origins. The historical truth is just one and quite simple, and I urge you to watch that video if you have the time, of course, obviously, to avoid having to repeat myself. But let's take a general look at it again. Anyway, shall we? This question pops up a lot, even after I did that one video. Does the Schwarzesonne, or the Black Sun, comes from the Iron Age or medieval period, or is it a modern invention? As I said, there is no other historical truth, just one, and whatever you wish or choose to believe in, it's only up to you. The Black Sun symbol, it is a symbol created in the 20th century, a solar circle formed by 12 sig runes arranged radially, created specifically in 1934 by the members of the SS of Heinrich Himmler. The symbol is found in the castle of Vivesburg, Jüran, in Germany. The site was a school for members of the organization, the SS, to study Germanic heritage and ancient Nordic religion, and also a place for esoteric religious celebrations and cults. Heinrich Himmler considered the castle to be the center of the Germanic world. The Black Sun symbol is a construction of the 20th century, of the 30s, precisely the moment of the great boom in mysticism and the occult. This is the historical truth, nothing more. Please, spare me those comments again saying that it is a symbol that has a deep cultural and scientific meaning since primordial times, the symbol of the goddess. It represents draconian rule. This is a map of the projection from above with the northern point and of our planet. This represents Saturn, the cosmic Christ with his 12 rays. Kali Yuga, Lucifer, represents Dharma, Yin and Yang, the divine spark in man, the fiery spirit of sulfur, Apollo, the temple of Set, mystic rebirth, archetypal symbol of the transcendental soul. Good gods, listen to yourselves. It's everything and nothing at the same time. Those are not the historical truth. Those are simply a choice of belief. Now, whatever Heinrich Himmler's idea concerning this modern symbol, we have no idea of his intentions by creating it. All the assumptions previously said and a lot more were created later on by people who made all sorts of assumptions based solely on forcibly wanting to connect every esoteric possible explanation to this symbol for all sorts of reasons. It's just a 20th century reinvention of the sun wheel. In fact, I must add that the 12 rays in this symbol represent a common religious philosophical belief of the representation of the pantheon of 12 gods or 12 members, either as the sons of the Judeo-Christian God or the 12 aspects of the same God, or even the 12 original disciples or apostles whom Jesus met in Galilee. This is simply the same old religious philosophy based on Judeo-Christian teachings, actually, and the importance of the number 12 in Judeo-Christian beliefs that was transported to a variety of mythologies, including Greek, Roman, and Old Norse during the Middle Ages, when the old myths started to be written down by Christians and interpreted by Christians, which is why it is presented to us in a lot of sources that the Olympian and Norse gods were 12 in total, for instance, which is, it just isn't true. The number 12 is very recurrent in a lot of occult ideas, actually based on Judeo-Christian religious philosophy. Runic tattoos or tattoos with runes as an historical evidence in Old Norse society. I've done a video concerning the tattoos of the Vikings, actually. Take a look at the description of this video to find the links to other videos I have recommended, as well as the bibliography I've used to make this video, and one you can also consult if you have any doubts and or want to continue the study of this subject. Actually, if you can't find the bibliography in the description, it's because it was too long to place in there. It often happens. So I'll leave it either by the end of this video or in a fixed comment. So, runic tattoos, there is little evidence that the Nordic people of the Viking Age used tattoos in general, runic or not, or any type of paintings or body markings. Film, television, and fantasy books, as well as gaming, popularized the idea of tattoos among Nordic warriors. It's possible they had tattoos, but runic tattoos isn't likely. Runic tattoos are often perceived to have been used by Nordic peoples because of the belief the runes are magical in nature, so tattooing them was with the intention of having some sort of protection or any magical interpretation. Runes were a writing system, as I've said, in the Viking period. Tattooing them is the same thing of using regular writing systems of our modern world and express the name of our new girlfriend we just met a week ago and now we love her so much, or to express how much our mother loves us, or to tattoo some cliche of live, laugh, and love. Frightening. Now, runic tattoos are a modern thing because it looks great to have a regular sentence but written in mystical symbols, or having the symbols themselves tattooed to express a word or a sequence of ideas because of the belief they are magical in nature. Guilty. Like when you choose a tattoo with Chinese characters because it looks cool and different and mysterious and mystical, but it either means strength and discipline, or it can also mean cooking vegetables in a rock or yellow trousers upon a tree. You never know what you are getting. I must remind you that during the Viking period, before Christianization, of course, the Old Norse people were still very animistic in nature, with a lot of animistic religious conceptions. So if they had tattoos on them, of any sort, it would have been related to actual religious meanings and ideas of that period, most likely naturalistic designs, animals and trees, most likely. Any today's idea or assumption, or even in academic works, sometimes it happens, related to the presence of runic tattoos, as something belonging to the Norse spirituality of the past, is a trend from New Age and Neo-paganism, which has a great influence upon a lot of people, and obviously at a certain point it's even hard to discern the truth. And so runic tattoos come as the indisputable truth, especially when it comes to the idea of tattoos representing Odin and in relation to runes, based on the idea that, on that myth, on that account, when Odin was the deity that brought forth the knowledge of the runes, reinforcing the association of the runes as magic symbols. Nationalist ideas and beliefs and or political extremism are also responsible for the idea that the Old Norse people had rune tattoos or runic tattoos. In general, rune tattoos are forms of expressions of social identity and belonging to certain very broad groups or to communities of enthusiasts interested in the medieval Nordic world, rather than people with a real interest in historical reconstructions. To finalize this video, runic yoga. I've already expressed this before on another video, and in this video as well. The so-called Standardhalgauder system was created in Germany in the 1930s. In 1920, Friedrich Merby developed a system called Rune Gymnastic, which was later beautified to the fancy name Rune Yoga, and later on, of course, Standardhalgauder, fancy and mysterious. The supposed historical basis for these types of body postures in the Nordic world would come from the representations on the horn of Galahus, in which we find reliefs in the form of runes and anthropomorphic figures in positions similar to runes. Rune yoga is, supposedly, a magic system that uses postures, gestures and sounds, Galdr, to project the energy of the runes and cause magical effects on the person. This is in great part actually based on Indian religious principles and discipline, as was said before. I'm not saying this doesn't work. I'm only pointing that this is a modern invention, a 20th century invention, and did not occur in the past. It's important to point out that the Galahus horns are two objects found in Denmark around the 17th century and 18th century as well, of which only copies remain today. The experts never reached a consensus on the interpretation of the drawings, which are human, anthropomorphic figures, animals, and various non-figurative geometric symbols. Some drawings correspond to graphic representations found later on in Scandinavia of the Viking Age, like a woman with a horn of liquor, and a horned warrior, similar to the one found in the cauldron of Guddenstrup, included on the collection of the National Museum of Denmark. And others are obviously unique representations. There's a lot of figures there that do seem to represent dancing, especially sword dancing, which was a thing of the past, actually, an historical thing. But on dancing, that's a whole other subject. I think that there is no doubt that these objects, these horns, have a ritualistic context to them, or were used in some ritualistic performance. But other interpretations concerning these horns are purely speculative. It's possible that they are also interpretations of myths, but nothing points to yoga positions, obviously, as it isn't even a Scandinavian thing of the past. There is absolutely no evidence that the human figures present in these two horns, the horns of Galahus, refer to body positions performed by humans in Scandinavian antiquity, whether imitating runes or performing any kind of magic, religious practice, or mysticism. Alright, my dear friends, I hope you have enjoyed this video. I hope it was useful. I also took the opportunity to revise some of my past claims concerning the runes. I mean, we reach a point when we gather new information or new information pops up, so it's healthy to be updated, to have our information updated and keep up with the new information that pops up. The aim is always to evolve and become wiser and not cling to obsolete ideas, right? So I took the opportunity to revise some of my past claims. Anyway, again, thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. As always, tak for now.